Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships. Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever had the experience of when narcissism, the concept of narcissism, has been weaponized by the narcissist? If you have had that experience, go ahead and drop it in the comments and let's take this one on. Listen, folks, the internet was kind of purpose-built for narcissistic people, more so obviously than regular folks. Narcissistic people use it really well to get validated, scream loudly, troll people, leave cruel comments. It is a narcissistic mothership and toxic womb. And as you can know, narcissistic people can look at content about narcissism and learn about narcissism, just like you do. And the narcissistic people can also look at content about narcissism and learn about narcissism online or by reading books, just like you do. And believe it or not, and it may even feel delusional to you, they will, again, read about it. They'll read about the elements of narcissistic abuse, even about things like coercive control, and knit together a complex and elegant theory about how they are the wronged party and they are the ones experiencing narcissistic abuse. They really will. I am sure this has happened to many of you. And if you are having to face down a narcissistic person in family court, regular court, human resource dealings or other employment stuff, or even not even in an institutional setting, just having to deal with them, get ready. If it hasn't happened to you yet, it will, because this is real. I have said this many, many times. Narcissistic people are argumentative and can win a fight solely on the basis of endurance. They are unrelenting, and there's something about conflict that energizes people with antagonistic and narcissistic personality styles. The fight is almost a tool of regulation for them. So just arguing and fighting and breaking someone down actually helps a narcissistic person stabilize their emotions. And they want to win, and often win just as a result of a war of attrition. Other people just give in, give up, and say, okay, you win, just to shut them up. Now, take that argumentativeness and couple it with their victimhood, and because even the grandiose and malignant narcissistic folks believe they're victims, believe everyone and everything is against them. And then you have that intense, obsessive focus that narcissistic folks can bring, and that accompanies this whole dynamic. And you better believe that a narcissistic person will do their homework, and they will try to portray the other person, either in a relationship with them or in a legal action with them, as the perpetrator or the offender, as the narcissist, as a sociopath. They may even call in legal statutes like coercive control, and despite abusing, manipulating, raging at, isolating, and gaslighting, they will then turn around and say that all those things they did to you was what was done to them. They are also deeply entitled, and they genuinely believe that the only right way is their way, and that they are more special and that things should go their way. I have to say that the part about all of this that I find the most galling, frankly, is when a narcissistic or psychopathic or sociopathic or dark tetrad or just overall antagonistic person takes a legal statute, something that took years to bring into law, such as coercive control, and then incorrectly, inaccurately, and inappropriately tries to assert it is happening to them. And the reason this pisses me off is because coercive control is very, very real. And the statute was written and put on the books. And it was meant to protect people who were in actually coercively controlling relationships and give family court a tool to address these harmful behaviors. Well, now that the antagonistic narcissistic folks and their attorneys have gotten hold of it, and it is still very new in the United States, with only 3 to 4 states having it on the books, this entire statute can get weakened by people who actually are the coercers. And they're turning around and alleging that they're the ones who were coercively controlled. And the judges are having to sift through the evidence and figure it out. Listen, the good judges get it, the less savvy ones not so much. And what it does, though, it could potentially weaken the power of this in a case where it really, really matters. Make no mistake, a malignant narcissist or a psychopathic or sociopathic person will have no problem falsifying text messages, editing video and audio content, and do other things to portray the non-antagonistic person or the less antagonistic person in the relationship as the offender or as the perpetrator. And it will become their single-minded focus to do this. Because let's add to that list of argumentativeness, victimhood, and entitlement the issue of vengeance. And hell hath no fury like a sociopath or a narcissist scorned. It's not enough to show you that you are wrong. They also need to ruin your reputation, take what matters to you, and make you pay. Sometimes for decades, sometimes for lifetimes. What can you do about this? Here's where I got to tell you, I'm going to be a little helpless here. I'm going to throw up my hands and say not a hell of a lot, except you got to document the hell out of everything. It can almost feel like a full-time job to save and catalog all the emails, the text messages, the camera footage. Make sure you back it all up, but you're going to need it. Second, you need therapy. Do what you need to do, but you've got to not be reactive. Narcissistic people push buttons, and they're very good at it. It's that whole phenomenon of baiting we've talked about. And you may have kept it together, not taken the bait, stayed calm 500 times. But at the 501st time, you might have had a bad day, you might have been sick, you might have just hit the wall, and you react. You react to their baiting. Maybe you yell, maybe you curse, maybe you call them names, and it all would be understandable. But somehow they will manage to capture that on video. And in the era we're living in, that one piece of evidence may show you, and they will share it with everybody, to show that you're out of control and strengthen their argument. The hardest part of doing this work is that this term narcissist, narcissism, they're not well understood by most people. And the pithy 2-minute TikTok videos or unvetted content aren't helping this confusion. However, the narcissistic and sociopathic and overall antagonistic people are doing their homework and making the puzzle pieces fit in a way that can uphold their victimized cause, that they're the ones who are the harmed party. So do not be surprised when they try to use that positioning around you. And before they are done with you, they will have portrayed you, maybe even successfully, as an abusive, narcissistic, gaslighting, coercive controller. You have to be prepared for that. Being disarmed and being thrown off by this can lead you to sometimes behave more reactively and weaken your own cause. So again, my own helplessness aside with this, best practices for all of this means that when you show up to courts and institutional settings, you don't use words like gaslighting and narcissistic or psychopathic in any form. In any form of legal or court setting, judges or other officials like mediators or HR managers do not like it. And they take umbrage at a petitioner in any kind of hearing using what feel like clinical terms to them. And you do not want to be the one who sits and tries to explain this person in a position of authority and say, no, it's not clinical. It's actually a collection of behaviors and traits, blah, blah, blah. They don't care. So you may have been prepared and played a clean game and not used words like narcissist, but then the person who is actually doing the abusing shows up with those words and uses those words. It can feel like one more example of unfair and gaslighting because it is. So let's break this down. First, I'm going to say this again. You got to be prepared and have all that stuff documented. No entity is going to do anything without documentation. Second, don't use those terms like narcissism and gaslighting, even if they do. It's unfair, yeah, but it's more likely to backfire, and hopefully it backfires on them. Third, you got to stay calm. Not just in any formal procedural space like a courtroom, but even outside of there. Find something else to do if you feel that need to have those strong reactions. Exercise, box, lift, paint, call a friend. And if those things don't work, consider therapy that focuses on emotional regulation. You want to give them as little as possible to hang their hat on. Fourth, put nothing negative in writing with them. Here is where gray rock matters. Responses such as yes, no, that's it. Let them send their paragraphs-long text screeds that you respond to very formally and very briefly. Fifth, don't get into the rumor game. The narcissistic person, yes, they will triangulate and draw everyone in. You don't have to remain silent, but you can carefully and briefly talk to the person who might be hearing the smear campaign nonsense. You might say something like, "I'm so sorry, it's deeply inappropriate you were drawn into this. As you can see, the situation's not healthy. Again, I'm sorry they put you through that." And then let it go. Anyone in your midst who is able to be indoctrinated by the narcissistic person, they don't know you well enough and may not be healthy enough to keep around. And these relationships and their demise do become a place where we take stock of everything and everyone in our lives. I am seeing and hearing about this more and more, about narcissism being weaponized. And keep in mind, are there situations, some of you may be wondering, well, aren't there situations where it's narcissist versus narcissist or sociopath versus narcissist? Absolutely, yes. And you can imagine how messy that gets. Judges get burned out and angry in these situations. And there is no teaching the other person how to behave because both sides are behaving badly. So we're just going to cast that bit aside. But in most cases, it's one toxic person and one person who's enduring a lot of toxic stuff. None of us behave perfectly in these relationships. How can we? The stress of someone manipulating and raging and taunting and gaslighting means that all of us have had less than graceful moments in these relationships. That's normal. But those normal moments will get weaponized. And even worse, they will take the language of abuse, gaslighting, manipulation, personality, coercive control, and all the rest of it, and use it against you. And your only protections and defenses are to be well-regulated, prepared, organized, and well-substantiated with documentation. But it's important that you not be surprised when it happens. This kind of calling you out as the narcissistic gaslighter is a classical piece of post-separation abuse. And the narcissistic and antagonistic people will use the courts, legislation, legal procedures, and lawsuits as tools to punish you. And they will drag it out for years, using these institutional and procedural settings as tools of extortion and as ongoing psychological hammers. It is of very little solace when it is happening to you in real time, because it can take the abuse you already endured in the relationship and magnify it 100-fold. But once things really go off the rails and you are in the discard phase or in the post-separation abuse phase, especially in a more severely narcissistically abusive relationship, the motto you've got to carry, the tactic you've got to carry is preparation and patience. If you're really lucky, they will find a new target and may lose some steam and interest. In others, they don't, and your life will be shadowed by this relationship. In some cases, you do get lucky and a good judge, and they shut it down. In some cases, there may even be criminal penalties against the narcissistic person. But that's not most cases. In most cases, it just drags on, and yelling, "That's not fair," won't do a damn thing. You need to be prepared and ready for when this happens, because in many cases, it will. I hope that gives some clarity, even though if it's depressing, and thanks again.